Hello again from Tolpuddle 2021. Hope you've been enjoying the music, dancing along like we have. Today is the thing that it's all about. Today we've got the really important event, which is paying tribute to the martyrs in the village.
Yeah, one of the benefits of doing things online is that we're able to talk a little bit more about the history. So we're shortly, me and Hannah are dashing off to go and do the wreath-laying at James Hammett's grave, but now I'd like to introduce a film about James Hammett.
This is the story of my great-great-great-great-grandfather, James Hammett, one of the Tolpuddle Martyrs, and the only one to return to the Dorset village of Tolpuddle, where he's buried. I'd started my family tree in 2002, prompted by the birth of my first grandchild, Angel. This wasn't as easy as I'd imagined. I was raised by my great-grandmother Fanny from the age of 6 near Shaftesbury. Her strong Dorset accent had me looking for Harriet Emmett as her mother. And in 2006, I was contacted by Sally McMahon, a Hammett researcher and a mine of information. I was completely blown away to learn that I was descended from this brave man. I was really puzzled that my great-grandmother hadn't shared any of this history with me, as we were very close. She shared many tales of her childhood and struggles in life, but nothing of her great-grandfather James. Why hadn't she told me? I felt hurt somehow. As time went by, I learned more and more about the martyr's story and discovered the pact that was made between the 6 men, that this part of their history would not be passed down to their grandchildren and would remain buried. I make no apology for being the first Hammett grandchild to break that pact. My admiration for this man knows no bounds. James was born into the poor life of farm labourers in Tolpuddle on the 11th of December 1811 and was baptised in St John's Parish Church on the 3rd of May 1812. At 17 he had his first brush with the law and was convicted of stealing iron, for which he spent 4 months with hard labour in Dorchester jail. He was in Tolpuddle when the Swing Rebellion swept through the country in 1831, but there's no evidence that he was involved in the smashing of threshing machines or the burning of ricks in protest at the desperately poor wages at that time. 2 years later, he joined the union being formed for farm workers to resist even further pay cuts. By this time he was married to Harriet with a young son, George. On an early morning in February 1834, he was arrested along with the 5 others. He was charged with administering an unlawful oath at a meeting he never actually attended. It was James's younger brother John who was at the meeting, which had been held in the upstairs room of Thomas Stanfield's house. But James said nothing to deny this charge and was sentenced along with the others on the 15th of March 1834 to 7 years' transportation to Australia. Reverend Thomas Warren, who had baptised and married James, had betrayed them in the courthouse, and James must have felt this keenly. Only a year earlier, he had baptised George, his son. Aged 22, James was described as 5 feet 7 1/4 inches tall, blue-eyed with dark brown hair and a fair complexion. James and his wife Harriet must have feared they'd never meet again. Many convicts didn't survive the ordeal or ever return home. It's said that her cries were heard across the village on the morning of the arrest. James arrived in Port Jackson in Australia in September 1834 after a 5-month horrific voyage on the ship Surrey, and was assigned like a slave to Edward John Eyre, a 19-year-old British landowner, to look after a flock of 400 sheep at Woodlands Farm near Queanbeyan, some 10 miles from what we now know as Canberra. He'd have known nothing of the massive campaign going on in the UK to free the 6 men. All across the country, workers signed petitions and held meetings, and tens of thousands of people marched to London to deliver the petition to Whitehall. It was borne on the shoulders of 12 unionists and was taken to the office of the Home Secretary, Lord Melbourne, who hid behind his curtains and refused to accept the massive petition. The campaign eventually won their pardons, which were granted in March 1836, and 5 of the 6 returned home in 1837. But James's freedom was delayed due to a charge of assault on a guard in Australia. There had been many changes in the 5 years James had been in Australia. His mother had died, aged 49, only 18 months after he left, and his father had remarried. Also, England had a queen, young Victoria. The others had returned 2 years earlier, and the Dorchester to London Committee, who had won their freedom and supported the families in their absence, had now leased 2 farms for them in Essex. James eventually set sail for home on the ship Eureka on the 8th of March 1839, arriving back in the UK in August 1839. On September the 22nd, a grand reception was held in Victoria Theatre, now the Old Vic, in London. Emotions ran high, and even the leader of the Martyrs, George Lovelace, an accomplished public speaker, found it difficult to speak to the large cheering audience. Alone among the martyrs, James Hammett didn't write of his experiences. He'd had a hard life, but James was to outlive 3 wives, 5 children and 4 grandchildren. In 1875, the National Agricultural Labourers Union led a strike of farm workers. Employers in Dorset responded by sacking and evicting union activists. A large rally was held in Tolpuddle, and James was invited as the guest of honour. The great leader of agricultural workers, Joseph Arch, presented him with an engraved silver watch, 10 gold sovereigns, and an illuminated address. The words of the address paid tribute to James and the Tolpuddle Martyrs, but also attacked local landowners for their treatment of their workers. In his old age, he is believed to have run a night school for children in Tolpuddle. He lived opposite the parish church, but with his sight failing, he opted to enter the Dorchester Union workhouse rather than burden his niece, and that's where James died on the 21st of November 1891. In 1934, the TUC commissioned the radical sculptor and typeface designer Eric Gill to make a new headstone for James. It was unveiled by George Lansbury, the leader of the Labour Party.
They fought for something which was to be of benefit not to a few of their class, but the whole of mankind. Every child in the land to have an equal opportunity to a God-given life.
Since then, with a few exceptions, there have been wreath-laying ceremonies every year to honour James and his comrades.
James Hammett was the only one of the Tolpuddle Martyrs who was buried here, and also perhaps in those few moments remembering that when he was buried, the squire turned up to make sure that no one said anything in favour of trade unionism. A short few moments of silence while we respect their memories and rededicate ourselves to what we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Norman.
I still have to pinch myself to believe that this brave man was my grandfather. His story has already been passed on to my children and grandchildren, and I know they'll continue telling the story of the enigmatic loner, James Hammett, our grandfather and our hero.
Brave men, we've read your story, the trial, the grief, the pain and the
dark day dawning, did the sun force away through the clouds of the morning? Was a lark on the wing above you soaring freely in the sky? What thoughts did you share, what fears were growing? Did you think you'd be home for the conqueror's throwing? Did you think of the land where you'd be going? On the road of Dorset, on the road, on the road, by the masters of oppression you were taken from your land. On the road, on the road, the immortal power of freedom took you by the hand. When you crossed Gray's Bridge with the jail ahead, past the spire of the church, the graves of the dead, did you feel regret for the things you said, the oath that you had sworn? Were you sure in your heart that your cause was right? Were you firmly resolved to stand and fight for the right to resist the master's might, for children yet unborn? On the road, on the road, by the masters of oppression you were taken from your land. On the road, on the road, the immortal power of freedom took you by the hand. The immortal power of freedom took you by the hand.
They can mock our religion, from our family divide us, but they can't break the oath of a Tolpuddle man. As brothers and sisters, with an oath we will bind us. The labouring poor in all England shall rise, though Frampton has framed us. They never will tame us. Arise then in union, we'll yet win the prize. Give me a hand. They can bring down our wages, starve all our children. In chains they can bind us, steal all our land. They can mock our religion, from our family divide us, but they can't break the oath